Good morning, dear friends. Yeah, welcome back to the channel this morning. I hope we have a wonderful time. I hope we all are enjoying the classes as we are running through them different subjects and topics just to make our learning better and more interesting. This morning, we're going to continue on our discourse of the nervous system. And we've done videos where we've talked about the brain, the spinal cord, and different other things. Please do well to check some of our our former videos and learn one or two things. Today, we're going to talk about the structure of the neuron. Now, what's the neuron? The neuron is the cell that is the unit of the unit cell of the nervous system. What does that mean? That means that the nervous system, for it to function, it's a collection of many neurons that function within the nervous system. So today we're going to look at the structure of the neuron. What does the neuron look like? Now, the neuron is made up of three major parts. And the three parts that the neuron is made up of is one, the cell body, which we also call the stoma. Then we have the dendrites, and we also have the axon or axon, depending on how you decide to pronounce it. Now, the first one, which is the soma or the cell body, is this circular oval structure that we have at the head of the neuron. And this circular oval structure has majorly two things. It has a nucleus and it has a cytoplasm. Now, the nucleus, like we know, is the center of control of activities for cells. So the nucleus in the cell body or the soma of the neuron is there to control all the activities of the cell. It helps the cell to divide and every other thing that the cell has to go through. The nucleus runs all of these activities for the cell. Now, after we have the nucleus, then we have the cytoplasm. And we know what the cytoplasm is. It's a jelly-like substance that we have within the cell and is there, as a fluid or like a jelly. And within it, we have all the different organelles, the mitochondria, the ribosomes, the lysosomes, all the different organelles that make up that cell, that is the neuron, are present. And all of this is present within the cell body, and it makes the cell body a really important part of the neuron. The cell body, you can look at it as the head, or it looks like the head of the neuron. Now, when we leave the cell body, we go to the dendrites. What are the dendrites? Dendrites, they are tree-like projections. We have finger-like projections, like we say in biology. We also have tree-like projections that come out all from all the sides of the cell body. And what does the dendrite do? The dendrites are there to receive signals. Now, the dendrites have a large surface area. They have membranes that cover them. And not only do these membranes cover the dendrites now have a large surface area. And on this large surface area, what do you have? You have a lot of receptors. And what is the function of these receptors? These receptors are there with a lot of, they are there to collect signals and impulses. Now, these receptors are very sensitive to neurotransmitters. One of the neurotransmitters that is most common and important in the nervous system is acetylcholine. So these dendrites have membranes. Membranes cover the whole of these dendrites, and these membranes are filled with receptors. And these receptors have the capacity to be able to, detect the presence of neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine, so that the neuron is able to transmit signals. Now, we might ask that, so what does the neuron do exactly? The neuron is there for the transmission of both electrical and chemical signals and impulses, so that the body is able to give itself information, know when to move away, know what to do, know when glands should release particular materials, and all of these things are involved in what the neuron does. Now, after you have your cell body and you have your dendrites, the next thing we have is the axon. Now, what's the axon or the axon, depending on how you pronounce it? It's this long, cylindrical, tube-like looking structure that stretches out from the cell body. So we see it like a long tube, and it's across that tube that you have the transmission of impulses, different kind of both chemical and electrical impulses, so that these impulses move from one neuron to another neuron to get the information from the brain to the spinal cord to all the glands and muscles that are within the body. Now, there's something called a hillock. A hillock is a cylindrical cone-like structure that is attached very closely to the cell body, and it is the beginning of the axon, and then from there the axon flows like a tube all the way down. And then we have what we call the myelin sheaths. What are these myelin sheaths? Myelin sheaths, they are fatty tissues that are attached to the axon, and they are there to help in the transmission and the movement of these signals and impulses along the neurons. So they are very important. They also give the neuron insulation. They help the neuron to be insulated, and that helps the neuron to function much better. This is very important. Now, it's also important to know that in these myelin sheets, there are two different types of cells that produce different types of myelin sheets for different kinds of neurons. Now, for the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system, we have cells that we call the Schwann cells. The Schwann cells are the cells that produce the myelin sheets that are on top of the neurons that service the peripheral nervous system. Remember that I discussed earlier on in some of the other videos that there's peripheral nervous system and there's central nervous system. Now, we also have what we call oligodendrocytes. Oligodendrocytes, these are cells that produce the myelin sheets that are used on the central nervous system. This is quite important for us to know. We also have what we call the nodes of Ranvier. The nodes of Ranvier are present, they are present as gaps on these myelin sheets, and they help to push the impulses. The impulses, move and jump from one node of Ranvier to another node of Ranvier, and this is really important in the transmission of impulses and signals within the nervous system. Now we have what we call the synapse. Now, what's the synapse? The synapse is a little gap or opening between one neuron and another neuron. And the synapse has a structure. It's important for us to know what the structure of the synapse is like. Now, what you have what we call the presynaptic neuron. That is the first neuron that is going to give the impulse. It's called the presynaptic neuron. And then you have synaptic cleft, which is the gap, the actual gap or hole between two neurons. And then you have the postsynaptic neuron, which is the neuron to which the signal is given. So you have a giver, you have a receiver, and you have a hole or a gap between the giver and receiver. And you have acetylcholine. Most of the time, there are other neurotransmitters, but you have acetylcholine as the neurotransmitter, the substance in the middle, the fluid in the middle that helps to flow this impulse from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, so that this impulse continues to move without any hindrance. Now, lastly, to round off this video, we'll talk about the types of neurons. You have motor neurons, you have sensory neurons, you have interneurons. Now, let's talk about sensory neurons. These are the neurons that are attached to all the sense organs: the ears, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the skin. And they take information, signals from all these sense organs, and they take them to the central nervous system, and from there to the brain for interpretation of impulses and whatever is happening outside the body. Now, we also have the motor neurons. The motor neurons are there when the brain has processed the information and has decided on what it wants to do, maybe perhaps a reflex action or even a thought-out action. What now happens is that impulses are sent from the brain through the spinal cord to the peripheral nervous system using the motor neurons. And then the motor neurons are there to, work on the different muscles of the body. The muscles, for example, if there's a need for an increase in heart rate, the motor neurons tells the heart, and then there's that increase in heart rate. If there's a need for any different action, the motor neurons are the ones that carry out this action. Now, we also have what we call interneurons. Interneurons are neurons that are like at a junction, and they are a bit sensory and a bit motor. So they are in the junction, just as we have our capillaries for our blood vessels, which is there in the middle of the venous and the veins. So you have your interneurons, which is there between the motor neurons and the sensory neurons. I hope we have learned one or two things from this lesson that we have run today. Please remember to like our content, share our content, share it to your friends, and let us get better and better at our sciences. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.